I stood there in a conference room on a Monday morning, the hum of machinery on the Velwin Manufacturing plant floor in Grand Rapids, Michigan, ringing like a familiar heartbeat. I had spent 17 years here, 17 years writing code-tweaking machines and keeping production lines running smoothly on equipment older than my pickup truck. But that day, Jessica Barnes, a brand new plant manager with an MBA and a gaze that never made eye contact with me, stood in front of the team and announced, "We're modernizing our operations. Some positions will be made redundant." I knew my name would be next. My name is Darren Lee, and this is the story of how I was fired, dismissed as an obsolete machine, and then turned that betrayal into an unlikely triumph. If you're watching this video, you've probably felt undervalued, or you're worried about being replaced in a world of new technology. Don't miss this story. It's not just about me, it's about how you can stand up for yourself no matter what. Join me as I explore, because by the end of the video, you'll learn an important lesson about standing up when you're being pushed aside. And trust me, you'll want to watch until the end. I started at Velwin Manufacturing in 2007 as a young engineer fresh out of college. Harold Velwin, the company's former owner, hired me after I showed him how to reprogram the factory's first robotic arm to be 30% faster while still being accurate. "You speak the language of machines," Harold said, pointing to the machines. "That's rare." For 10 years, I built automation systems my way. I wrote proprietary software for each large piece of equipment, creating calibration procedures to keep old machines running well beyond their lifespans. When manufacturers stopped supporting older models, I kept them running. When new equipment arrived, I tweaked the software to integrate with existing systems. Thanks to me, Velwin had the lowest defect rates in the industry, supplying precision parts to 12 automakers and the aerospace industry. But when Harold retired, his son sold the company to Travella Freight, a logistics conglomerate that wanted to move into manufacturing. They kept me on because of the numbers I brought. Why replace $50 million worth of equipment when my algorithms made it run like new? I was proud of that. I spent late nights troubleshooting production issues, weekends upgrading systems when the line was down. I didn't just work, I lived with the machines. Then Jessica showed up in 2024. She was young, ambitious, and she brought PowerPoint slides full of graphs about how outdated our factory was compared to the competition. She never spoke directly to me in meetings, only referring to legacy systems as if they were a plague that needed to be eradicated. I began to see signs of trouble when Nixora Labs representatives showed up taking pictures of dashboards, asking questions of workers. "Are we hiring consultants?" I asked Jessica. "Just looking for optimization opportunities," she replied, eyes glued to her tablet. "Nothing to worry about." But I did. I started backing up all my test files and code repositories on my personal laptop. They weren't company property. They were my brain power. I knew the system would work, until it didn't. And then only I would know how to fix it. The day I was fired, I didn't scream or argue. I'd seen others do it over the years they fought, but they left anyway, only to lose face. I nodded, gathered up my laptop, the coffee mug my daughter had made for me in 3rd grade, my spare pair of glasses, and the notebook full of handwritten code. Jessica arrived as I was packing the last box. "The severance package is very generous," she said, sliding a folder across the table. 2 months' salary, plus accrued vacation time. I looked at her. "Ample," I repeated, not touching the folder. She continued, her voice flat. "Darren, understand. Your systems? They're outdated. Nixora is going completely digital, cloud-based monitoring, machine learning. It's the future of manufacturing." I zipped up my laptop bag. "They'll figure it out," I said, and left. Jessica didn't know that my system, old as it was, had saved Velwin millions of dollars through its superior accuracy. She never asked why our factory had the lowest defect rate in the industry. She didn't understand that I built them to last, and only I know how to fix them when they break. As I left the factory, I walked past the CNC machines. I'd programmed the assembly lines, I'd customized the quality control scanners with my own algorithms. I didn't look back, but I knew deep down they would call me. And when they did, I would decide the true value of 17 years of loyalty. 6 weeks later, the phone rang. "Darren, it's Jessica from Velwin Manufacturing." Her voice was less confident than before. "We met. There's a problem with the Southwest line. Our team can't figure out what's wrong. I let the silence drag on. What's the problem, I asked. Sudden stop error code not in the documentation. Production is down 20% on that line. I closed my eyes. The Southwest line, the one I warned, needed a software update before winter. What did Nixora Labs say, I asked, neutral. A pause. They're still getting used to the old systems. I trust them to figure it out. I kept my voice even. After all, they're doing a full digital transformation. Jessica cleared her throat. Darren, I know you might feel underappreciated, but this affects the whole team. People could lose shifts if we don't fix it. She was tactful, appealing to my loyalty to the workers, but I remember clearly that none of them spoke up when I was sent away. I'm available for consulting, I said. The rate is $300 an hour, 4-hour minimum payment in advance, and I need a contract outlining the scope of work. Silence. That's double your old rate, Jessica said. That's my consulting fee. Take it or leave it. She called back within the hour. They agreed. The next morning, I arrived at the plant, signed in as a guest, and was taken to the production floor. The Southwest line lay idle, surrounded by Nixora technicians and frustrated workers. Leon, my only friend there, who occasionally went fishing with me, saw me and smiled with relief. Thank God you're here. It took me exactly 27 minutes to find the problem, a software bug, just as I'd predicted. The solution was in my calibration files, which I never shared. I plugged in my laptop, pretending to search through the folders, knowing exactly where they were. 45 minutes later, the line restarted. Jessica looked both relieved and annoyed. Thanks, Darren. I don't know what we'd do without you. I closed my laptop. Glad to help. Anything else? She hesitated. Actually, the CNC machine in Zone 3 is having issues too. Random quality control failures. Can you take a look? I looked at my watch. That's beyond the scope of the contract. I need a new contract. Her face hardened. Darren, be reasonable. You're here. I smiled slightly. I'm being reasonable. I'm treating this like a business deal, like you made it out to be when you fired me. I left, leaving a message email if you want to schedule another consultation. I built these systems. I know exactly what happens when they're not maintained properly. Leon smirked. And you're going to make them pay for it. It wasn't a question, but I replied, they're already paying. From there, the calls became regular. Every week, sometimes twice, Jessica called with a new problem. Each time I negotiated a new contract, a rising fee. Each time I fixed the exact problem they hired me to fix. I did nothing more, nothing less. I was playing the long game, and I knew I had the upper hand. But then another call came in, not from Jessica. Mr. Lee, this is Andrew Keys, Vice President of Operations for Travella Freight. I sat up straight. Good afternoon, Mr. Keys. He got straight to the point. Our Grand Rapids facility is having unprecedented quality control issues. Warranty claims have tripled. We've lost 2 aerospace contracts due to accuracy concerns. Jessica told me, you've provided consulting services for specific engineering issues. I paused, waiting. We'd like to discuss a more comprehensive agreement. I let him wait. I see. He continued, we'd like to bring you back as a contractor for 6 months full-time to address the current issues and document your knowledge of our systems. I raised an eyebrow. What about Nixora Labs? A pause. We're reevaluating that relationship. Translation, they're about to be fired. I allowed myself a small moment of satisfaction before answering. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Keys, but I'm currently in discussions with other companies. My time is limited. Name your price, he said bluntly. I quoted a figure that was 3 times my previous salary. Keys didn't hesitate. Okay, I'll draw up a contract today. 2 days later, I returned to Velwin as a contractor. Jessica was no longer there. Leon said she'd been transferred to another Travella facility. When I reconnected my laptop to the main control system, I realized the extent of the damage. Nixora's attempt to reverse engineer my calibration process had corrupted critical software. Their machine learning algorithms had thrown accuracy far off the mark, with nearly 30% of the components failing the final quality check. But the most notable thing was when I accessed the management server. In a folder labeled Strategic Plan, I found Jessica's original proposal to Travella's leadership. It detailed how replacing me with Nixora Labs would save over $200,000 per year. It predicted a temporary increase in error rates. A 3% cut in the conversion was considered acceptable for cost savings. Jessica didn't just fire me to modernize. She sacrificed quality to cut costs, betting that my systems were simple enough for anyone to maintain. She never found out what I actually did. I called Leon into my makeshift office and showed him the documents. He whistled. "She's been after you from the start." I shook my head. "Not just me. Quality, precision, everything this plant built its reputation on." Leon nodded. "So what's your plan? Fix everything and walk away?" I smiled slightly. "No, I'll fix their systems. Then I'll make sure this never happens again." That night, I began designing a new plant management system. I called it VelTTech, short for Velwin Electronic Tracking and Equipment Calibration. Officially, it integrated all existing equipment with clear documentation, safety measures, and transparency. Unofficially, it was my insurance policy. I wanted this system to show management exactly what they were getting, and more importantly, it would require my ongoing consulting to maintain at my new contractor rate. Over the next month, I methodically overhauled each system in the plant. I started with the most critical production lines: aerospace components, precision, automotive parts. I restored factory calibrations from personal backups, updated the software, and ran comprehensive diagnostics on every piece of equipment. The defect rate dropped immediately. Production speeds increased. The factory floor began to operate at its former efficiency. But I didn't stop. Every night I continued to build VelTTech. I added the features I knew management would need: real-time quality metrics, predictive maintenance schedules, complete transparency between the shop floor and headquarters. I wanted this system to prevent another crisis like the one just happened. But more than that, I wanted it to make me irreplaceable in a whole new way. 4 weeks into the contract, I scheduled a meeting with Andrew Keys and the rest of the management team. I stood at the conference table, my laptop hooked up to a projector. "The immediate crisis is resolved," I began, "but you have a structural problem that goes beyond the technical." Keys leaned forward. "Go on." I pulled up 3 months of production data. The red line showed soaring defect rates, spiking warranty claims, failing accuracy metrics, all while reported costs fell. This is what happens when you optimize for one variable and ignore everything else. The room was silent. I moved to the next slide, showing the VelTTech interface. Here's what I propose: a fully integrated system of all plant systems with executive-level visibility, real-time quality metrics, predictive maintenance schedules, complete transparency between the shop floor and corporate headquarters. Keys asked. "Would this prevent a situation like that?" I replied. "It would make the choices clear. You could still prioritize cost over quality, but you would do it with full awareness of the consequences." I presented more screens showing that VelTTech monitored each machine, tracked the flow of materials, predicted maintenance needs, and calculated the actual cost of each part, including failure and warranty costs. "How long will it take to implement?" Keys asked. 3 months for full integration. I've built the core architecture, and who will maintain it after that?" asked another executive. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "I will do it under a long-term consulting agreement, 2 days a week on site. My company will retain ownership of the VelTTech software licensed to Travella with full support and updates." Keys raised an eyebrow. "Your company?" I nodded. "Lee Industrial Systems, my new consulting firm." I hadn't actually started a company yet, but Keys didn't need to know that. "That sounds expensive," one executive remarked. "Cheaper than what just happened," I replied evenly. "I've calculated the cost of the quality crisis over the past 3 months. Lost contracts, warranty claims, overtime, emergency repairs." I pulled up another slide showing the total: over $3.4 million. The room fell silent again. "My annual consulting fee will be $320,000, I said. "The VelTTech license will be $150,000 a year. That's $470,000 a year. Compare that to your recent losses." Keys looked at me. "You've thought a lot about this, Mr. Lee," I replied. "I've had time to think about value, about knowledge, about what happens when companies treat people as replaceable parts." He nodded slowly. "I need to take this to the board, but I think you've made a compelling case." When the meeting ended, Leon waited for me outside. So he asked. I shrugged. We'll see. Or, do they value what I'm offering, return or not? Leon laughed. After that hit, they'll appreciate it. I paused at the door. By the way, I'm going to need a floor manager for Lee Industrial Systems. Someone who understands machines, understands people. Interested? Leon blinked in surprise, then smiled slowly. Are you serious? I nodded. Damn serious. I'm done with building other people's successes. Time to build something of my own. A week later, Andrew Keyes called to accept my proposal, not just for the Grand Rapids facility, but for all 6 of Travella's plants. 6 months later, I was standing in the observation room on the factory floor, watching operations run smoother than ever. Next to me were Keyes and a manager I didn't know. Darren. This is Patricia Winters, our new operations manager, Keyes said. We shook hands. Impressive, Patricia said, gesturing toward the plant. Andrew said your VelTTech system has revolutionized our visibility into manufacturing quality. Just clarifying what's always been there, I replied. Patricia smiled. Well, it's gotten the attention of the entire leadership team, especially after what happened in Pittsburgh. I raised my eyebrows. Keyes looked uncomfortable. We've implemented a similar modernization in the Pittsburgh facility, Patricia explained. The results were just as dire, but thanks to your system, we caught it before it became a full-blown crisis. I nodded. I'm glad to hear that. There's something you should know, Patricia continued. Jessica Barnes was fired. I kept my face neutral. I see, Keyes added. Not just transferred. Terminated. After we discovered she was taking consulting fees from Nixora Labs while she was with us, a clear conflict of interest. So that was it. Jessica wasn't just cutting costs to impress the boss. She was taking kickbacks from Nixora. We've also instituted a new company policy, Patricia said. Every cost-cutting initiative must include a quality impact assessment, and every engineering system must have a proper knowledge transfer protocol. I nodded. Sounds good. Patricia smiled. We call it the Lee protocol, actually. Your VelTTech system has proven the value of insider knowledge. I looked down at the factory floor where Leon was training new technicians. Where workers were working confidently with equipment, they understood where quality metrics were displayed on large screens throughout the facility, all running on my system, all generating revenue for Lee Industrial Systems. Thanks for that, I said quietly. It means more than you think. On a chilly fall morning, exactly a year after I was laid off, I stood in my new office in downtown Grand Rapids. Through the window, I could see the Grand River, the trees along its banks turning red and yellow. The office was now home to 12 employees, engineers, technicians, and support staff for Lee Industrial Systems. My phone buzzed with a text message from Leon: upgrades to Zone 4 complete. All systems okay. I smiled. Leon had become my right-hand man, overseeing the implementation at the Travella facilities, while I focused on expanding into new clients. In the last quarter alone, we added 3 manufacturing companies. The industry began to talk about us, the company that preserves old knowledge, the system that bridges the gap between obsolete equipment and modern analytics, the founder who turns layoffs into victories. On my desk was an industry magazine with our story on the cover, The Knowledge Gap. How Lee Industrial Systems is saving the manufacturing industry millions. Below was an invitation to speak at next year's automation conference, the same forum Jessica had headlined. I picked up a framed photo of my daughter at her graduation last spring. She had just started her career as an industrial engineer, inspired in part by watching her father's career crumble and rise from the ashes. Dad didn't just take lemons and make lemonade, she told me at our graduation dinner. He took lemons and built a lemonade empire. The office door opened and my assistant poked his head in. Here's your 10 o'clock guests. The Velwins. I nodded. Harold Velwin, now retired, called to ask about buying the old company from Travella. He wanted to modernize without sacrificing quality. I straightened my tie and walked into the conference room. No longer an employee, but a trusted advisor. No longer replaceable, but essential. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong. It's becoming what they never imagined you could be. But the story doesn't end there. A month later, I got a call from a Travella competitor who wanted VelTTech for their plants. I flew to Chicago to meet with their executives, showing how my system could save them from making the same mistakes. They signed the contract on the spot, Lee Industrial Systems' largest contract to date. Meanwhile, I began working with school's local university, set up a program to train young technicians to maintain legacy systems. I wanted to make sure knowledge like mine never got lost again. My daughter, now an engineer, volunteered to teach some classes. Seeing her stand in front of the class explaining how to calibrate a CNC machine, I felt more proud than any contract. But not everything went smoothly. A new customer in Ohio tried to pressure me to lower my VelTTech license fee, threatening to find another supplier. I smiled and said, "Try it. But call me when your line stops." 2 months later, they called begging me to fix their system for double the price. I learned that value isn't just what you know, it's what others realize they can't live without. One evening, I sat in my office looking out over the Grand River. The phone rang, a text message from Leon. "New client in Texas wants to meet. Heard about you at the conference. Are you coming?" I typed back, "Make an appointment. I'll be there." I closed my laptop, stood up, and looked out at the city. 18 years ago, I was a young engineer trying to prove myself. Now I'm Darren Lee, building an empire from what others threw away. And I'm not done yet. There are other factories to fix and other companies to learn about the value of knowledge. I'll be there, not to exact revenge, but to build a legacy. A legacy that no one can call obsolete. If there's anything to learn from this story, it's this: don't let anyone define your worth. Take your knowledge, turn it into power, and when the world tries to replace you, show them how wrong they were. I stood there, looking out at the Grand River, shimmering in the sunset, feeling like everything was moving, not just the water, but my life. Lee Industrial Systems was now a major player in manufacturing, but I knew the road ahead was long. Success wasn't a destination. It was a constant battle to prove your worth. And I was ready for that battle. A week after my meeting with the Velwins, I sat across from Harold Velwin in my conference room. He, now in his 70s, still had the same piercing gaze I'd had the day I'd first met him. "Darren," he said, his voice low but firm, "you've done what I never dreamed possible, kept the spirit of Velwin alive through giants like Travella." I smiled. "I've only done what you taught me, Harold. Put quality first." He nodded, but his eyes betrayed a hint of worry. "I want to buy Velwin, but Travella is playing hardball. They know the value of the system you built. They won't let it go." I leaned forward. "They don't own VelTTech. I own it. If you buy Velwin, I'll license the system to you for a reasonable fee. But I need you to promise me one thing." Harold raised an eyebrow. What? I looked at him. "Never let someone like Jessica Barnes take control. Quality can't be sacrificed for short-term profit." Harold laughed, a laugh that echoed around the room. "You're not going to change Darren. Okay, we have a deal." But the acquisition wasn't simple. Travella, realizing the importance of VelTTech, began to apply pressure. They hired a team of lawyers to review my licensing agreement, looking for loopholes that would allow them to keep control of the system without me. One morning, I got an email from Andrew Keys, polite but sharp. "We'd like to discuss VelTTech's intellectual property. There are some questions about software developed while you were at Velwin." I read the email and smirked. They were trying to play legal games, but I was prepared. I immediately called my lawyer, Ellen Harper, a sharp-tongued woman who had helped me start Lee Industrial Systems. "They have no basis," Ellen said after reviewing the contract. "VelTTech was developed on your personal time with your personal resources. But Travella has money. They'll try to drag this out and force you to compromise." I nodded. "Then we fight back. I'm not going to let them take what I built." Ellen smiled. "I like that spirit. Prepare for a long fight, Darren." The legal battle lasted 3 months, consuming hours of meetings and dozens of documents. Travella asked me to provide the VelTTech source code for inspection. I refused, citing intellectual property rights. They responded by withholding licensing payments, which squeezed Lee Industrial Systems' cash flow. I had to freeze hiring 2 new engineers and cut marketing spending. Leon noticed the tension on my face during a meeting. "They're trying to kill you, aren't they?" he asked. I nodded. "They think I'm going to break, but they don't know I've survived worse." To keep the company afloat, I started looking for new clients. I flew to Detroit to meet with an auto parts manufacturer struggling with an old automation system. The chief operating officer, a man named Carl Watkins, greeted me with a firm handshake. "I've heard of you, Lee, the guy who saved Velwin from going under. We need that magic here." I presented VelTTech, explaining how it could integrate with their old equipment without the need for costly replacement. Carl nodded, but he had a concern. I hear you're in legal trouble with Travella. If I sign with you, will the system be withdrawn? That question gave me pause. Travella wasn't just threatening my company, they were damaging my reputation. I looked straight at Carl. I built VelTTech from scratch. It's mine, and I'll protect it at all costs. If you sign with me, you have my word the system will work, and I'll be here to support it. Carl looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. I trust you. Sign the contract. The deal with Carl brought in $200,000 in new revenue, enough to keep Lee Industrial Systems afloat during the litigation. But the pressure didn't stop. One evening while I was working late in the office, my daughter Emily called. Dad, I just read an article that Travella is suing you for ownership of VelTTech. Is that true? Her voice was worried. I sighed. Yes, honey, but you'll handle it. Emily was quiet for a moment. I know you'll win. You always find a way, but don't let them wear you down, okay? Her words hit me like a punch. I realized I wasn't just fighting for the company. I was fighting for my family, for the legacy I wanted to leave. I decided to change my strategy. Instead of just playing defense, I would go on the offensive. I asked Ellen to look into Travella's contracts with Nixora Labs, suspecting that Jessica Barnes wasn't the only one receiving illegal kickbacks. After 2 weeks of digging, Ellen found gold internal emails showing that a senior Travella executive had approved consulting payments to Nixora in exchange for prioritizing Travella's contracts. It was evidence of unethical behavior enough for me to threaten countersuit. I arranged a meeting with Andrew Keys this time in my office. He walked in looking more tired than the last time we met. Darren, what do you want? He asked bluntly. I slid a stack of documents across the table. Copies of Nixora's emails and contracts. I want Travella to drop the lawsuit and pay any outstanding licensing fees. Otherwise, this will go to your board and I will sue you for unfair business practices. Keys blanched. You're playing a dangerous game. I smiled. I've been playing this game since you fired me. I'm pretty good at it. A week later, Travella dropped the lawsuit and settled the entire debt. What's more, they agreed to extend the VelTTech licensing agreement for 3 years with a 15% increase in fees. It was my biggest win yet, but I didn't celebrate. I called Leon and the team into a conference room. We've weathered the storm, I said, but this is just the beginning. We need to expand, train more people, and make sure no one else can challenge us. Leon nodded. Where do you want me to start? I handed him a list of 5 Midwest factories that wanted to meet to discuss VelTTech. Start here. And Leon, hire more people. We need a bigger team. Leon laughed. You're finally spending money. I shrugged. It's not spending money, it's investing. Over the next 6 months, Lee Industrial Systems grew exponentially. We signed on 4 new factories from Ohio to Indiana. I hired 8 more employees, including a young engineer named Maya Torres, who reminded me of myself 20 years ago. Maya was a master at programming CNC machines faster than anyone I had ever met. One day, while we were working at a factory in Cleveland, she turned to me. Mr. Lee, why don't you sell VelTTech to a tech giant? You could make millions. I shook my head. Maya, if I sell, they'll turn it into what Jessica Barnes dreamed of, a flashy system that no one understands. I built VelTTech to protect people like us, not to get rich quick. Maya nodded, but I could see her thinking. A few weeks later, she floated an idea: integrate VelTTech with IoT sensors to monitor machine performance in real time. It won't replace human knowledge, she said, it will augment it. I looked at her impressed. Go for it. And if it works, you'll lead the project. Maya smiled brightly. Thank you, Mr. Lee, I won't let you down. Maya's IoT project was a huge success. We deployed it at a factory in Illinois, reducing downtime by 25% and increasing production by 10%. Word spread quickly, and companies from all over the Midwest started calling. But success brought new challenges. A competitor, Cybertech Solutions, began marketing a system similar to VelTTech for 30% less. They hired former Nixora Labs engineers, and I suspected they were trying to copy my code. I called Ellen and asked her to investigate. Meanwhile, I focused on improving VelTTech. I added a security feature that encrypted all machine data hooks to prevent reverse engineering. When CyberTech tried to convince one of our Wisconsin customers to switch to their system, I flew out to meet them. CyberTech may be cheaper, I told the plant manager, but they don't understand your equipment. When their system breaks, who are you going to call? I'm here with my team, ready to fix it within 24 hours. The manager nodded. I'm choosing you, Lee. I don't believe in empty promises. CyberTech didn't give up easily. They launched an ad campaign calling VelTTech an outdated solution for an outdated plant. I laughed when I saw the ad. They were making the same mistake Jessica made, disregarding real-world knowledge for shiny technological promises. I retaliated by publishing a detailed report on LinkedIn, using anonymized data from our customers to prove that VelTTech reduced maintenance costs by 40% and product defects by 20%. The report went viral, shared by hundreds of engineers and plant managers. CyberTech went silent after that. But the biggest challenge came in the spring of 2026 when a major customer in Texas reported a major failure. A major production line was down, costing $50,000 a day. I flew to Houston with Maya and Leon. When we checked the system, I realized the problem wasn't VelTTech. A customer technician had accidentally overwritten the calibration software. Maya worked through the night to restore the settings while I retrained their team on maintenance protocols. By morning, the line was back up and running. The plant manager, a man named Hank Rogers, shook my hand. Darren, I thought we lost this line. You didn't just save us, you taught us how to avoid making the same mistake. I nodded. Hank, that's why I built VelTTech. Not to replace you, but to help you do better. Hank smiled. I want you to train my entire team. Send me the invoice, I don't care how much. Back in Grand Rapids, I received a letter from Harold Velwin. He had successfully acquired Velwin Manufacturing from Travella, and he wanted me as his chief advisor. Darren, he wrote, you didn't just save my company, you saved the industry from itself. I folded the letter, feeling a surge of pride. But I knew I couldn't stop. There were too many factories that needed VelTTech, too many workers who needed training, and too many lessons to share. I began writing a book, Irreplaceable Knowledge, about my story and the lessons I learned from Velwin. Emily volunteered to edit the manuscript, and she added her own perspective on modern engineering. When the book was published in late 2026, it became a bestseller in the manufacturing industry and was used as a textbook in universities. I was invited to speak at conferences across the country, from Detroit to San Francisco. Every time I took the stage, I told my story not to brag but to remind people your knowledge is power and no one can take it away from you unless you let them. One evening, as I was preparing for a conference in Atlanta, Emily came into the office with a gift. It was a new coffee mug engraved with the words Darren Lee, the irreplaceable. I laughed. You embarrassed me with the old mug. Emily hugged me. Dad, the old mug was the beginning. This is your legacy. I looked at the girl, now a confident engineer, and knew she was right. I didn't just build a company. I built a legacy, not just for me, but for her, for Leon, for Maya, and for everyone who believes in the value of knowledge. My story continues. Lee Industrial Systems now has 25 employees and contracts with 15 factories across the U.S. We are developing VelTTech 2.0 with artificial intelligence, not to replace humans but to learn from them. I still fly around, meet with customers, train technicians, and fight against those who think machines can replace the heart and mind of an engineer. Every day I remind myself I am Darren Lee, who was once called obsolete, but proved that knowledge is truly timeless. If you're watching this video, I want you to ask yourself, what is your value? What do you know that no one else knows? And what are you doing to protect it? Share your story in the comments. How have you been overlooked and stood up? Like, subscribe, and continue this journey with me. I'm Darren Lee, and I'll see you in the next video. I stood in my office looking at the coffee mug Emily had given me, the words irreplaceable glinting in the light. But I knew that in manufacturing, no one is truly irreplaceable unless they keep moving forward. Lee Industrial Systems was growing, but the world wasn't standing still. New technology emerged every day, and competitors like CyberTech Solutions were lurking, waiting for their chance to overtake me. If I wanted my legacy to endure, I needed to accelerate not just in the United States, but globally. And that's when my story entered a new chapter filled with risks, opportunities, and lessons I'll never forget. One morning in early 2027, I received an email from a German manufacturing company, Rheinmetall, one of Europe's largest aerospace suppliers. They'd heard about VelTTech from an article in an industry magazine and wanted me to fly to Frankfurt to give a presentation. "We're having trouble with our legacy equipment," the email read. "Our automation systems can't keep up with Airbus's new quality standards. We need your solution." I read the email and felt my heart pounding. This wasn't just a contract, it was a chance to put Lee Industrial Systems on the international map. But I also knew that Europe was a different playing field, with strict regulations, different work cultures, and competition from tech giants like Siemens. I called Leon and Maya into my office. "We have a great opportunity," I said, sliding the printout of the email across the table. "But this isn't the Midwest. If we fail, our reputation will be tarnished not just in Germany but around the world." Leon raised an eyebrow. "Do you think we're ready?" I looked at him. "We have to be. If we don't, someone else will take this opportunity." Maya, always full of energy, chimed in. "I've looked into the European aerospace standards. VelTTech can meet them, but we need to adapt the user interface to German and integrate it with their ERP system." I smiled. "Good. Maya, you lead the software adaptation. Leon, you take care of logistics. I'm flying to Frankfurt next week." The trip to Germany was a whole new experience. As I entered Rheinmetall's headquarters, I was overwhelmed by its size, a factory 3 times the size of Velwin's, with hundreds of robots and technicians working in unison. The operations director, Herr Klaus Weber, greeted me with a stiff handshake and a polite smile. "Herr Lee," he said in German accented English, "we've heard a lot about you. But I have to be frank, we've been working with Siemens for over 20 years. Why should we choose a small company from the US?" The question wasn't unexpected, but it still gave me pause. I took a deep breath, remembering all the times I had been doubted, from Jessica Barnes to Travella. "Mr. Weber," I began, "Siemens makes great systems, but they're designed for new plants with new equipment. My system, VelTTech, is built to save plants like yours, where old equipment is an asset, not a liability. I don't replace your machines. I make them work better at a lower cost, and with the transparency your management needs to make the right decisions." Weber nodded slowly, but I could see he wasn't convinced. "Let me prove it," I said. "Give me a week to run a test on a line. If VelTTech doesn't improve performance, I'll leave without charge." Weber agreed, but on one condition: the test had to be completed before Airbus came in for a 10-day quality check. I called Maya and Leon immediately and asked them to fly to Germany with a team of 3 technicians. We worked around the clock integrating VelTTech into Rheinmetall's wing production line. Maya tweaked the software to display numbers in German while Leon trained local workers to read the predictive maintenance alerts. I oversaw everything, checking every line of code, making sure there were no errors. The night before the Airbus inspection, I barely slept, double-checking every sensor and calibration. The day of the inspection arrived, and I stood next to Weber as the Airbus inspectors walked through the line. They inspected every component, measuring accuracy down to the micrometer. When they were done, the head inspector, a woman named Sophie Laurent, turned to Weber. "I've never seen such precision on an old line. What's your system?" Weber looked at me, smiling for the first time. "It's VelTTech from Darren Lee." Sophie nodded. "I'd like Mr. Lee's contact information. We have other suppliers who need the system." The contract with Rheinmetall was signed the following week, worth $1.2 million over 3 years. But more important was the introduction from Airbus. Within 3 months, I had inquiries from 2 other factories in France and 1 in Italy. Lee Industrial Systems was no longer just an American company, we were a global name. But international success comes with new challenges. I needed to build a team in Europe, hiring people who knew the local language and culture. I sent Maya to Frankfurt to oversee the new branch, a decision that excited and worried her at the same time. "Mr. Lee, I've never managed an international team," she said. I put my hand on her shoulder. "Maya, you've made IoT work. You can do it. I believe in you." Meanwhile, in the US, Cybertech Solutions struck again. They hired a former Travella employee who had worked under Jessica Barnes and started spreading rumors that VelTTech was insecure and vulnerable to hacking. The rumors spread quickly, causing a customer in Indiana to suspend their contract. I knew this was more than just competition. It was a personal attack. I called Ellen and asked her to investigate the source of the rumor. At the same time, I organized a webinar inviting all customers and partners to demonstrate VelTTech's security features. Our system encrypts all data, I explained, flashing security protocols on the screen. We have passed Airbus's security tests, the highest standards in the aerospace industry. The rumors of a vulnerability are false, and we will hold anyone who spreads them legally responsible. The workshop was a huge success. Not only did the Indiana customer renew their contract, but I received 3 new requests from factories in California and Texas. Ellen later confirmed that Cybertech was behind the rumors via a shady PR firm. I sued them for defamation, and within 6 months, Cybertech agreed to pay $500,000 and publicly apologize. I used the money to fund a scholarship for engineering students at the University of Michigan called the Knowledge Scholarship to honor those who champion the value of practical skills. But not all the challenges came from the outside. One afternoon, Leon walked into my office looking more nervous than usual. "Darren, we have an internal problem." He explained that a young technician, Brian, had accidentally leaked part of the VelTTech code to an online technical forum, thinking he was just asking for feedback on a bug. While the code wasn't enough to clone the system, it was still a serious security breach. I summoned Brian, a 24-year-old with a panicked look in his eyes. "I didn't mean to, Mr. Lee," he said. "I just wanted to fix it faster." I looked at Brian, remembering myself at that age, eager, but sometimes too hasty. "Brian," I said, "mistakes don't define you. How you fix them matters. From now on, you'll be working directly with Maya to learn our security protocols. If you make another mistake, there will be no third chance." Brian nodded, clearly relieved. I then held a mandatory training session for the entire team, emphasizing the importance of security. The incident with Brian was a reminder as the company grew, I needed to build not just systems, but also a culture of accountability and learning. By the end of 2027, Lee Industrial Systems had locations in 3 countries and 40 employees. VelTTech 2.0 was launched with AI that predicted machine failures 30% more accurately than the previous version. I flew to Paris to present the system at an industry conference where I was honored as Innovator of the Year by a European Engineering Association. As I accepted the award, I thought about the day I was fired when Jessica Barnes called me obsolete. I smiled and said into the microphone, "Knowledge is never obsolete. It just waits for the right person to shine on it." But the glory didn't last forever. One morning, I received news that Rheinmetall had a major problem. A production line had completely stopped threatening the Airbus contract. I flew to Germany, immediately taking Maya and Brian, now a trusted technician. When I investigated, I discovered that the problem was not VelTTech, but a faulty batch of parts from a third-party supplier. Airbus blamed Rheinmetall, however, and Rheinmetall looked at me. Weber, now more of a friend than a customer, said bluntly, "Darren, I know it's not your fault, but if we lose this contract, the Frankfurt branch will close." I couldn't let that happen. I proposed a bold plan: use VelTTech data to trace the faulty parts, identify the specific batch, and convince Airbus that the problem was fixed. Maya and Brian worked for 48 hours analyzing millions of data points. I met with the Airbus inspectors, presented evidence that the defect was limited to 0.02% of the components, and Rheinmetall replaced them. Sophie Laurent, who had praised VelTTech, nodded. "Herr Lee, you saved us again." Airbus renewed the contract, and Rheinmetall awarded us an additional $300,000. Back in Grand Rapids, I threw a party for the team. Leon raised his glass to Darren, who turned a crisis into an opportunity. Everyone laughed, but I raised my hand. "No," to all of us. "I just started it. You guys continue it." After the party, Emily pulled me aside. "Dad, I'm proud of you. But do you ever rest?" I laughed. "When I rest, you rest." She shook her head. "Never." My story is not over yet. Lee Industrial Systems now partners with 25 factories around the world, from Japan to Brazil. I'm in talks with a Korean auto group to integrate VelTTech into their plants. Meanwhile, I've opened a training center in Grand Rapids where young technicians learn how to maintain legacy systems, not just to get a job, but to keep manufacturing alive. Every day, I wake up with one goal: to make sure no one else is called obsolete like I was. And I will continue to do so, not out of revenge, but because I believe knowledge is the most valuable thing we have. I stand on a stage in Seoul, South Korea, spotlights illuminating a room filled with hundreds of executives from Asia's largest manufacturing corporations. The Industry 4.0 2028 conference was the biggest event I'd ever attended, and I was here to pitch VelTTech 2.0 to a huge potential partner, Hyundai Heavy Industries. They wanted to integrate my system into their shipyards and auto plants, a deal that could be worth tens of millions of dollars. But as I began my presentation, I noticed the skeptical looks in the audience. They weren't just evaluating VelTTech, they were evaluating me, an American from Grand Rapids daring to enter the playground of Asian tech giants like Samsung and LG. I took a deep breath, remembering the day Jessica Barnes called me obsolete. If I could outdo her, I could outdo anyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice booming through the microphone. I'm not here to sell you a flashy system or an empty technological promise. I'm here to tell you about a plant in Michigan where aging equipment was saved by knowledge. Human knowledge powered by technology. VelTTech doesn't replace your technicians. It empowers them. It doesn't destroy your plants. It makes them better. I clicked, and the screen displayed data from Rheinmetall defect rates, down 40% downtime, down 25% output, up 15%. The room began to murmur. I knew I had them. After the presentation, Hyundai's chief engineering officer, Park Min-soo, invited me to his office in Seoul. He was a quiet man with eyes as sharp as knives. "Mr. Lee," he said through a translator, "your system is impressive, but we have challenges that Europe doesn't have. Our shipyards run 24/7 with thousands of sensors and proprietary systems. Can VelTTech handle that scale?" I nodded. "Mr. Park, I've integrated VelTTech into aerospace plants with micrometer precision. But I don't just want you to try, I want to prove it. Let me run a test at one of your plants. If we fail, I'll leave without charge." Mr. Park agreed, but with a strict condition: the test had to be completed in 3 weeks before Hyundai reported its quarterly financial results. I called Maya, Leon, and Brian, told them to get their teams ready, and flew to Korea. When we arrived at Hyundai's shipyard in Ulsan, I was overwhelmed by the scale: dozens of giant cranes, hundreds of welding robots, and a network of sensors more complex than any I'd ever seen. Maya looked at me, her eyes both excited and worried. "Mr. Lee, this is our biggest challenge." I patted her on the shoulder. "And our biggest opportunity." "Do it, Maya." We split the work. Maya and Brian focused on integrating VelTTech with the sensor system, while Leon trained local workers on how to use the interface. I worked directly with Hyundai's engineering team, explaining how VelTTech analyzed sensor data to predict failures before they happened. But on the third day, we ran into a big problem. Hyundai's custom-built ERP system refused to communicate with VelTTech. Their technicians blamed us, and I sensed Mr. Park's suspicion. I gathered the team in a small conference room in the factory, the roar of machinery outside. "We have two options," I said. "Either find a way to integrate with their ERP or build a custom bridge." Opinions. Brian, now more confident after the code leak, raised his hand. "I saw a similar system in Germany. We can write a middleware API to connect VelTTech to the ERP without modifying their code." Maya nodded. "I can help, but we need to work all night." I looked at them. "Then do it. I'll convince Mr. Park to give us more time." I went to Mr. Park and said frankly, "We have a problem with the ERP, but my team has a solution. Give us 48 hours. He looked at me silent, then nodded. 48 hours, Mr. Lee. Don't disappoint me." Maya and Brian worked tirelessly, coding, testing, and fixing bugs. I stood by them, offering coffee and feedback when needed. By the morning of the second day, the API was up and running. VelTTech began receiving data from the ERP, and maintenance alerts appeared on the screen. Hyundai workers, initially skeptical, began nodding in approval. The test ended with results that exceeded expectations. VelTTech reduced downtime on the test line by 20% and detected 3 potential defects that could have cost millions of dollars. Mr. Park called me into his office. "Mr. Lee," he said, "I was skeptical of you, but you've proven yourself. We want VelTTech for 5 of our plants." The contract was worth $8 million, the largest in Lee Industrial Systems history. As I shook Mr. Park's hand, I thought back to the day I was fired when I left Velwin with a cardboard box. Now I was changing the industry globally. But success in Korea brought new problems. Hyundai required an on-site support team in Ulsan, which meant I needed to open an Asian branch. I sent Leon to Seoul to oversee the matter, a decision that both excited and stressed him. Darren, I've never lived abroad, he said. I laughed. Leon, you survived Jessica Barnes and Nixora Labs. Korea will be easy. He laughed, but I could see he was bracing for the challenge. Meanwhile, back in the States, I was facing another crisis. A major customer in California Pacific Precision reported that VelTTech had been hacked. Their maintenance data had been leaked to the dark web, and they were threatening to sue us for security breaches. I called Ellen and asked her to prepare for legal action, but I knew this could destroy Lee Industrial Systems' reputation if not handled properly. I flew to San Francisco to meet with Pacific Precision's CEO Linda Chen. Darren, she said, her voice cold. We trusted you, and now our data is for sale. How do you explain that? I took a deep breath. Ms. Chen, I don't believe VelTTech was hacked. Our systems are military-grade encrypted. I think the problem is your internal network. Let me investigate. Ms. Chen agreed, but with a warning, you have a week. If you don't get an answer, we'll sue. I took Brian, now our security expert, to the Pacific Precision plant. After 3 days of analysis, we discovered the truth. An internal employee, disgruntled after being denied a promotion, had stolen data using an unauthorized administrator account. VelTTech wasn't the target, it was just implicated. I presented my findings to Ms. Chen along with a recommendation: install a new layer of two-factor authentication at VelTTech to prevent similar incidents. Ms. Chen nodded. Darren, you saved us from a lawsuit. I want you to upgrade the security at all our plants. The California incident was a wake-up call. I held a virtual team meeting with both the European and Asian branches. We can't just be good, I said. We have to be the best. Any vulnerability, no matter how small, can destroy what we've built. I hired a cybersecurity team led by a former FBI agent to periodically audit VelTTech. I also started working with Emily, now an informal advisor, to develop a new AI feature detecting anomalous behavior in user data, helping to stop internal hacks before they happen. Meanwhile, in Korea, Leon reported that the Asian branch was struggling with the local work culture. Darren, the workers here respect hierarchy, he said over Zoom. They don't want to report bugs directly to me, they wait for management approval. That slows things down. I nodded. Leon, let's do some informal training like we did at Velwin. Invite them for coffee, talk openly. Build trust. Leon did, and within 2 months, the Korean team started reporting, directly accelerating the VelTTech rollout. But the biggest challenge came in the fall of 2028, when Cybertech Solutions, seemingly defeated, came back with a vengeance. They announced a new system, CyberCore, build as cheap VelTTech and aimed at our smaller customers. They convinced a factory in Ohio, one of my first customers, to switch to CyberCore. I flew to Columbus to meet with the plant manager, Tom Reynolds, a guy I'd worked with since the early days. Darren, he said, Cybertech is 40% cheaper, and they promise faster integration. I have to think about the budget. I nodded. Tom, I understand. But remember what happened to Velwin when they chose cheap over quality. CyberCore doesn't know your equipment. When it breaks, who are you going to call? Tom looked at me hesitant. Give me a reason to stay with you. I smiled. I'll upgrade VelTTech for you for free with our new AI feature, and I promise 24/7 support. Can Cybertech do that? Tom shook my hand. You're still trustworthy, Darren. But Cybertech didn't stop. They started a smear campaign, posting on industry forums that Lee Industrial Systems was too dependent on me, that if I retire or have problems, the company will collapse. The article went viral, causing some potential customers in Japan to cancel their meetings. I knew I needed to act fast. I organized an online conference inviting all my customers and partners. My name is Darren Lee. I began and I built VelTTech from scratch. But Lee Industrial Systems is not me alone. We have 50 employees on 3 continents, from Maya Torres in Germany to Leon Carter in Korea. We have trained hundreds of technicians to keep VelTTech running. This company doesn't rely on one person, it relies on collective knowledge. The conference put the rumors to rest, and the meetings in Japan were rescheduled. But the incident got me thinking about the future. I was 55, and while I loved the work, I knew I couldn't do it forever. I started working with Emily and Leon to develop a succession plan. Leon, I said in a meeting, you're going to be CEO one day. Start learning how to manage the whole company. Leon laughed. Darren, you're trying to get me off the factory floor, right? I shook my head. No, I'm preparing you to lead it. I also tasked Emily with developing VelTTech 3.0 with the goal of making the system fully automated in training new users. I want it to be smarter, she said. It will analyze how technicians work and suggest customized instructions. I nodded. Do it. And when it's done, you get the patent. Emily smiled. Dad, I learned from the best. In the spring of 2029, Lee Industrial Systems hit a major milestone: 100 factories worldwide using VelTTech. We held a ceremony in Grand Rapids with Harold Velwin, now 80, as the honorary speaker. He stood before the crowd, his voice shaking but strong. I hired Darren Lee when he was a fearless kid, he said. Now he's an industry leader, not just because of his talent, but because he believes in people. The crowd applauded, and I felt my eyes sting. I looked over at Emily standing next to Leon and Maya, and knew that my legacy wasn't just VelTTech, it was the people I had inspired. But even in victory, I didn't forget the first lesson: never be complacent. One morning, I received an email from a Silicon Valley startup claiming to have developed an AI that could completely replace factory technicians. They wanted to challenge VelTTech to an open competition at next year's Industry 4.0 conference. I read the email and smiled. They were the new Jessica Barnes with their flashy tech promises. We accept, I replied. But be prepared. VelTTech is more than technology. It's human knowledge, and no AI can beat that. I called the team into the conference room, showing them the email. We have a year to prepare, I said. They think they can replace us. Let's show them how wrong they are. Maya raised her hand. I have an idea for a new feature: real-time bug simulation to train technicians faster. Brian added, and I can beef up security to prevent them from hacking during the competition. Leon laughed. Darren, you've turned us into an army. I nodded. Because we are an army, and we will win. I stand in my office in Grand Rapids overlooking the Grand River, now shrouded in the delicate fog of early morning 2029. On the desk is a coffee mug that Emily gave me that reads, Irreplaceable, next to a framed photo of the Lee Industrial Systems team at their 100th contract celebration. From the day I was fired with a cardboard box in my hand, I built a company that operates on 3 continents, saved dozens of factories from collapse, and inspired a generation of young engineers. But my story doesn't end with numbers or titles. It ends with a lesson I want to share with you. A lesson that took me from an overlooked engineer to an industry leader. The Silicon Valley Startup Competition at the Industry 4.0 conference in 2029 is the final challenge I want to tell. They called their AI system Factory Mind, claiming it could completely replace technicians and systems like VelTTech. I looked at my team, Leon, Maya, Brian, Emily, and dozens of other engineers, and knew we weren't just competing against technology, but against a mindset: the idea that machines could surpass human knowledge. We spent a year preparing, integrating Maya's real-time fault simulation, Brian's security enhancements, and building a new user interface designed by Emily to help technicians learn faster. On the day of the competition, I stood on stage in Los Angeles facing the startup's CEO, a young man named Ethan Carter, with a confident smile and an expensive suit. The competition required both systems to handle a simulated production line with random faults thrown in to test their responsiveness. VelTTech faced Factory Mind in front of thousands of spectators, from executives to engineering students. Ethan took the stage first, boasting that Factory Mind could predict and fix errors in seconds without human intervention. The audience applauded, but I saw skeptical looks from the techies in the crowd. They knew the truth: machines might be fast, but they don't understand the nuances of a real factory. When it was my turn, I didn't talk much about the technology. Instead, I told my story: the day I got laid off, the sleepless nights I spent fixing machines, and how VelTTech was born out of a belief that humans and technology should work together. VelT, of tech doesn't eliminate technicians, I said. It empowers them to work smarter, faster, and more confidently. I clicked, and the screen showed VelTTech running error alerts popped up. The simulation technician, controlled from behind the scenes by Brian, responded immediately, and the line was back up and running within 45 seconds. Factory Mind, though, fast made a mistake. It missed a small sensor error, throwing the simulation line out of balance. When the results were announced, VelTTech won by a narrow margin, 92% efficiency to Factory Mind's 87%. The room erupted in applause, but I didn't celebrate. I walked over to Ethan and shook his hand. "Your system is good," I said. "But don't forget, people are the soul of the plant." Ethan nodded, losing his confidence for the first time. After the conference, 3 major companies, one from Japan, one from Brazil, and one from Australia, contacted VelTTech to sign a contract. But the thing I'm most proud of is an email from a young technician at the conference who wrote, "Thank you, Mr. Lee. You made me believe that my work matters." Back in Grand Rapids, I held a team meeting. "We won," I said, "but not because we were better. We won because we believed the right thing. Human knowledge is the foundation of every factory." I looked at Emily, now the director of product development, and Leon, who was about to take over as CEO. "I'm not getting any younger," I continued. "One day, I'll retire. But I know Lee Industrial Systems will continue because you, everyone in this room, are my legacy." In 2030, I stepped down from my executive role, leaving Leon and Emily to manage the company. I became a consultant, traveling the world to speak at universities and conferences, sharing my story. I expanded the training center in Grand Rapids, where hundreds of young technicians now learn how to maintain old systems and integrate new technology. Harold Velwin, despite his failing health, still visits every year, always with a bottle of wine and the words, "You make me proud, Darren." One afternoon, I sat by the Grand River with Emily, watching the water flow by. "Dad," she said, "I'm developing VelTTech 4.0. It will help technicians in developing countries where they don't have modern equipment." I smiled. "You remind me of myself," she laughed. "But I won't let anyone call me old-fashioned." I hugged her. "I won't be. I was taught by the best." My story ended there, but my mission did not. Lee Industrial Systems is now a leader in the automation industry, with 200 employees and contracts in 150 plants worldwide. VelTTech is used on every continent, from shipyards in Korea to aerospace facilities in Europe. But what I'm most proud of isn't the numbers. It's the letters from technicians who say, "My story inspired them to fight for their values." It's the proud look in Emily's eyes as she leads her team. It's the nod from Leon as he signs his new contract, knowing he's continuing my legacy. If there's anything to take from this story, it's this: you'll never be obsolete if you believe in your knowledge. Even if the world tries to replace you, take your skills, turn them into power, and build something no one can take away. I'm Darren Lee, once called redundant, but proving that true value lies in what you know and how you use it. Share your story in the comments. How did you overcome doubt to become irreplaceable? Like, subscribe, and keep fighting for your worth. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next journey.